Good evening, and thank you for joining me at Music Today. This is Keitaro Harada. The concept of the show is to bring in an artist each episode and have a conversation with the artist about a performance we will all watch and listen together. The live component is very important because I highly encourage viewers to comment and ask questions to the artist, just like Justin, who said, "Woohoo! Thank you so much." The idea of doing this show came about because of COVID-19. I wanted a platform to keep the music going for our fans. Even though we may not be able to experience live music performances together right now, I wanted a place where music lovers can join easily to converse with artists and to see more of a personal side of us. Music Today is a bilingual show. The live streams during your evening will be in English, and the shows that broadcast during your morning time is usually in Japanese for the fans in Japan. If you want to improve on your Japanese skills, you're more than welcome to watch the Japanese interviews too. You can watch it, listen in Japanese, and then click on the subtitle button here to read it in English after the live stream. This is show number 72. I'm very thankful for all the guests that have appeared since May and really feel so wonderful to be able to share time with wonderful musicians and artists. Without further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest for tonight. Since we cannot hear you applaud on this end, I would love for you to comment using the comment screen and write, clap, 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 or you can write clapping emojis, or you can even just say hello or, good evening. Just anything to know that you are there watching and supporting the program. So, for example, Dave, thank you for saying that you're here. Trey English, great to see you. So great to see you. Gosh, it's been years. But thanks for tuning in. So please welcome our wonderful special guest, Maestro Frank Ticheli.
Hello, Kay.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
I'm well, and hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Yay, fantastic. Frank, where are you quarantined right now?
I'm at my home in Pasadena.
Gotcha. Yeah. And how is situation in Pasadena?
Well, it's doing that here in Los Angeles. It's this wave, this curve they're talking about is not flattened. It's still going up. So we're not in good shape. Not quite as serious as it is in Florida, but not good. It's to the point now everything's shutting back down again. So I'm glad I got my hair cut 2 days ago because I saw it coming, and so I said, cut it all off. Because it could be, who knows when I will see you again. So,
well, and then everyone has the COVID-19, the right. Look.
Right. Show of hands, everyone. How many of you are not shaving? Here's one.
Exactly. Well, we already have a lot of hellos from Justin Silva, friends from Japan, Trey. Again, thank you. Scott is also saying hello, and fantastic. So for our viewers, I just want to share a quick introduction of how Frank and I know each other. Of course, I've known your music forever. It's like the reason why I love playing in wind ensemble is because of your music. I think the first music I ever played was Vesuvius sometime in middle school. And then as a saxophone player, I just love that solo. I really I remember probably singing the theme so many times until it got to a point where like my family had to have a rule that I'm not allowed to sing the theme anymore because it was just sort of like second language to me at that point.
And so you were in middle school.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. I was already an old man when I wrote that, and you were in middle school?
Yes. And then I never had a chance to meet you all these years. And at Interlochen, my teacher Fennell loved your music, and so we performed a lot of your pieces. But I never had an opportunity to meet you until just super coincidence. But I was in Fort Worth, Texas, and I walk into my hotel, and there is a band conference. I cannot remember the name of the band conference. The Texas.
I can't either.
Something clinic. Clinic.
Yeah.
and so I kind of glanced at the guest list, and then of course, like all the famous wind ensemble composers are there, and You had never met me, but I messaged you and I said, I'm here in the same hotel. Can I meet you? And sure enough, we got to meet each other. And that was,
Oh, with John.
with
Yeah.
John.
I
And
just
then,
have such fond memories of that time with you.
yeah,
We
Michael
had
Doherty
almost
was there. Yeah, Michael
Mike
Doherty was there.
Doherty.
And Jerry Junkin was there. I met everyone that I wanted to meet in the wind ensemble world all at this festival.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had such a good time. We had almost too good a time, I remember. It was just a lot of fun.
It was a lot of laughter. It's a lot of drinking and a lot of fun time. That's
And
for sure.
you were guest conducting the Fort Worth Symphony. I don't remember what. Do you remember what you were guest conducting?
I was conducting I was doing a movie concert that week, I think, whether it be Fantasia or Indiana Jones. I was doing one of those a couple of days after the conference, or simultaneously to the conference, I think. But you guys were already home by the time I was in performance.
Ah, yes, right.
Yeah, so that was. Well, I really, really treasure this friendship, and I'm so thankful that you're here today. So thank you.
Here. It's great to be with you.
Excellent. So let's talk about Blue Shades. Tell us about this music and how it came about, and we'll take a listen to a little bit of the work.
Okay. Well, it was one of the first, to my knowledge, one of the first large consortium commissions that occurred for wind band. There were plenty of other consortiums, but this is one of the first large ones. When I say large, I mean I think it was something like 30 bands that were part of this consortium. And so I had the real problem for me was how to, and they represented a wide spectrum of ability levels, from some of the very top wind ensembles in the country to some very modest little high school band program in New Mexico, and everything in between. So I was faced with the problem how to write a piece that would not bore those top groups, but not leave those more modest younger groups in the dust. How do you do that? How do you write a concert? So I was faced with that dilemma, and my only solution was, well, I wrote a piece that kind of left some of those lesser groups in the dust, but I at least gave them something fun to do, to try, let them have fun trying to play it. And that's where the jazz elements and the blues elements came into play. So that I just thought this would be something they would enjoy trying to play, and it would still challenge them. And of course I'm from New Orleans. And so it was also something I'd always wanted to do, was write a piece that reflected that early jazz that I was first exposed to as a very young, as a young child, really.
Oh, I didn't realize you were from New Orleans. So that's wonderful. Well, I want to let's take a quick listen to the beginning, and then we'll talk more about the piece.
This is the orchestral version.
Yes.
Cool.
Did you write the wind ensemble piece first and then orchestrate it to orchestra?
I did. This orchestral version came several years later for the Pacific Symphony. But I did keep the saxophone solo that's about to start. I kept that in the saxophone.
I see. Was it when you were with your time during Pacific Symphony? Was it a Carl St. Clair project?
It was right after I had an 8-year residency with them from 91 to 98. I guess that's 7. I'm a composer, not a mathematician. And it was right after that. I think it was just a couple of years later. He asked me, "Hey, Frank, could you do an orchestral version of Blue Shades?" And so I did.
Oh, fantastic!
And I'm really glad I did, because the double bass, the walking bass, dum 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 dum, dum, you got that, and that made me go back and rethink the band version. Now there's a 25th anniversary edition of the band version where I have included the double bass so that I can have that walking bass. Plus, I made 100 other changes in the 25th anniversary edition of the band version that just came out.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. But it was partly influenced by the orchestral version.
Interesting. There's already a comment saying there's an orchestra version. What? I haven't done the orchestra version yet, so I really want to program it sometime soon. I wanted to skip a little bit to the famous clarinet solo.
Oh, sure. And by the way, this is the Plymouth Symphony. They're a small regional orchestra in Ann Arbor, and I just loved playing with them. It's been done by the Dallas Symphony and a few others, not nearly as many performances as the band version. But I love this. I'm glad you picked this because I just love this.
Yeah. I love that you give an opportunity for the clarinet player. Of course, with blues and New Orleans jazz, clarinet solo is a huge part of that culture.
Yeah. And they have to stand up too. So the standing up is part of that. It's also part of that culture and part of the spirit of playing the solo.
And oftentimes, clarinet players that go into the orchestral route or band route, they're not comfortable playing jazz solos.
That's right. So, even more uncomfortable playing them standing up.
Right.
So exactly. you are faced with that. You have to go at it with a certain amount of courage and devil-may-care attitude.
Well, if the composer says stand up, you got to stand up.
Oh, I wish all conductors were like you. Thank you, Kay. Yeah. Oh, here's the end. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What? It's such a great piece. What a masterwork. I just love it. I love it. And I love the orchestral colors too, which is very different from the wind ensemble version.
Yeah.
They're two very distinct pieces, even though they're the same piece. It's amazing.
That's very true. I mean, in the end, it's a fun piece. It's meant to be a fun piece, but color is an important part of the piece. And so when you transfer it from wind ensemble to orchestra, because it's already a color-based piece with lots of transparent colors, you are just by just making that transference, you're going to hear a completely different color world because I'm selecting different individual colors in the orchestral version. So yeah.
Speaking of clarinet, one of my favorite piece of yours is the clarinet concerto. And I think it was the Nashville Symphony documentary. I think before it got, maybe it was the release of the CD. I can't remember which came first, but then I heard the first movement, the opening of the first movement, and I thought, oh my gosh, what did he do?
The first one's the hardest.
It's so iconic. You took such an iconic lick.
Oh, yeah. The Gershwin thing. Yeah.
Yes.
I did. And I got permission, but I had to get permission from the.
Really? Oh, I really wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. And it's ironic because, Gershwin did not he actually didn't invent that opening lick.
No.
That was someone from the Paul Whiteman band who came up to him one day in a rehearsal and said, "Look, I can do this." And he showed him I could do the gliss. Once you cross the break, you can do that half whole gliss. And Gershwin said, "Great, leave it in." And so it was a clarinetist in the Whiteman band who should get credit for that. But anyway, I did get credit, but they said you have to change it up a little bit. Don't do it exactly. So I added there's a little noodling kind of thing I added in the middle of that, and then did the Gershwin-esque thing there. But I had to quote him.
I can't believe you had to get permission for it.
I did, and it would have come after me if I hadn't. So, and it's called Rhapsody for George. I had to start with that because it's
of course
dedicated to Gershwin. I wanted to do that, and so yeah, I'm glad that they finally gave me permission. Took a long time though, by the way. Took almost a year.
That is like very infamous of the Gershwin Society.
Yeah. A lot of the states are like that as well. Yeah, the Gershwin. Yeah, but it's very true. The whole piece was done and waiting for them to grant permissions. I was ready to substitute out a different beginning if they had not. Really? But fortunately for me, they finally came through.
Oh my gosh!
By the way, now it's public domain. So
right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I know all that effort.
A few years later, exactly.
Well, for our listeners who are not familiar with what we're talking and why I'm so excited about this, let's take a listen.
Sure.
It's so Gershwin. It couldn't get any more Gershwin than that.
No. And as the piece goes rhythmically, I didn't take any of the notes from I Got Rhythm, but there's this ba 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 ba.
Yes.
Ba, ba, ba. It follows the contour, but not the notes because I didn't want to go there again. So I just have the rhythm, but not the pitches of I've Got Rhythm. That also is kind of a thread in that first movement.
Yes.
So
tell us a little about the third movement, which is one of my favorite. For the riff for Lenny.
Yeah, it's my favorite as well. I love the third movement. A lot of people love the second movement, which is Song for Aaron, dedicated to Copland. And then the third movement, dedicated to Bernstein, is my favorite as well. It's called Riff for Lenny. I just wanted to capture the spirit of Bernstein and actually both sides of his personality. Bernstein on the one hand was like this. He was sort of our national cheerleader for music, right? Like our preacher on his pulpit. His pulpit was the podium preaching about music. And so there's this kind of outward Lenny, this gospel-like extrovert Lenny. And that's represented by the orchestra. But then there's this, and it's cool too, this cool facade that he had. And that's represented in the swooping and swooning of the clarinet. But the internal Lenny was more nervous. He was a very high tension person. Yeah. And the orchestra represents that with all this hocketing and this nervous rhythmic accompaniment that happens here.
Yeah, this is such a great piece.
Yeah, you hear how the clarinet's cool and the orchestra's a little nervous.
This concerto project, did it come out of Giancarlo and the Nashville Symphony, or was it already a concerto that you had already been working on?
No, it actually was commissioned by a clarinetist named Håkan Rosengren.
Okay.
He is a Swede who lives part of his time in Sweden, part of it in California, part of it in Texas. He's kind of all over the place. And he commissioned both versions for orchestra and wind ensemble.
Okay.
And premiered it over in Sweden, the orchestral version. And he also did it with the Round Top Festival Orchestra with Joan Falletta conducting. And then the wind ensemble version, I don't even remember who premiered the wind ensemble version, but he did the sort of the orchestral premiere of the whole thing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And he's a fabulous clarinetist too, Håkan Rosengren. But this guy here, James Zimmerman, he's principal clarinet in Nashville, and he is a monster player. And boy, was it fun! It was fun collaborating with him, and of course, working with Giancarlo in the Nashville Symphony. That was just a blast. just one of the great memories of that whole year for me was working with the Nashville Symphony.
Fantastic. And then James Zimmerman, I recall during that time when this premiere was recording session was happening, he made a video about, practicing your piece and how to go about practicing this piece, the concerto. So I do remember that.
Yeah, I've forgotten that he'd done that. It's a really cool video that he made.
Yes, most definitely. So how were you introduced to music, and then at what point did you decide going in this career in music was your path? Because if I recall correctly, you're a trumpet player. Then
That's right. Well, as I mentioned, I'm from New Orleans, and so I used to hear, my dad used to take me into the clubs to hear the jazz musicians, and so I was, and Pete Fountain was a huge influence. Remember, I'm 9 years old here, 8 or 9 years old, and I just couldn't believe what he could do with the clarinet. So I wanted to play clarinet, but I also loved the trumpet. Actually got to hear Louis Armstrong once before he died as an 8-year-old kid. So Pete Fountain and Louis Armstrong were two idols of mine, but I mostly wanted to play the clarinet. We went to a pawn shop right in the French Quarter, right on Bourbon Street. And in the window of that pawn shop was a clarinet and a trumpet. And the clarinet was $80 and it looked really good. It was a used clarinet. And the trumpet was all dented up. It didn't look very good. It was 45. It was only $45. And my dad said, "Sorry, son, you're going to play the trumpet." And so I think about that. He made a $35 decision. What if he'd sprung that extra 30? Back then, that was a lot of money. But what if he'd sprung for that extra $35 and bought me the clarinet? Maybe I would have loved it so much that I would have been a performer instead of a composer, or maybe I would have detested it. Maybe I would have just gotten out of music altogether and not even been a musician. It was one of those forks in the road that we all have, right? You've had them. We've all had. Everyone out here watching, we all have those forks in the road, right? That was a big one for me. And I'll never know. Anyway, I'm glad things worked out the way they did. So I played trumpet, and then we moved to Texas later on, and then it was a culture shock for me because of the Texas public school music education programs. Those music programs were so much better and further along than this very modest little program I was in my school in Louisiana, and it was a shock to my adolescent system. I had no idea that I'm about 13, had no idea that kids my age could sound that good, but also play music that was so good. And that's when I started thinking, I want to do this. Were you
playing classical and jazz at that point?
Mostly classical, but I started playing jazz by high school.
I see.
And then for a while, thought I was going to be a jazz trumpeter. I was pretty good improviser, and I had good ears. As you know, that you need to be an improviser, but I never had the high range, and also I went to North Texas one summer, University of North Texas, and that woke me up. I realized, as good as I think I am nowhere close to these guys. It was a very humbling experience to be in that environment, to see those cats.
Of course.
And then I thought, maybe not. And anyway, it was around that time I started thinking, no, I want to be a composer. How do I do that? Who do I have to see? What do I have to do? I just started asking people, how do I do this? This is what I want. I want to be able to write music like the music I'm hearing around me in my environment. How do I do that? There was also a really astute teacher who was the assistant conductor at the high school. I was in Texas. This is Berkner High School, for those of you who know that school. And he came up to me one day and said, Frank, you're an okay trumpet player. Like that. He kind of, maybe kind of went like that. You're an okay trumpet, but your ears, you have the ears of a composer. You might want to think about that. So he put it on my radar at that age. And I mention this to music educators all the time. It's easy to see this kind of talent. Yeah. This talent, you see it, you hear it. It's not as easy to detect this internal talent that a composer has to have, the inner ear. You have to be more sensitive to that, and you have to look out for that. And I remind them, look out for that kind of talent as well.
What do you think you were doing that proposed him to comment in that way?
It was a couple of things. First of all, he noticed that I didn't need to I would read the music I very quickly didn't have to use music, and everybody else had to keep reading the music. Like Hindeman's Symphony we did, and I didn't need the music very early on. He said, "How do you do that?" I says, "Well, it's up there. I've already got it in my ear. I know it." And then I would also come in and say, I'm lifting, like I was lifting things off records.
Okay.
Records, these goes around and around for the younger people there. I would lift them off and I would bring them in and show him. Took this off the record. How is it? And so he saw, oh, he's doing that. And I didn't think it was a big deal, but he said, yeah, this is what composers need to have. So he was seeing so that's the kind of thing you look for. You look for someone who's playing by ear, maybe more than the others, and maybe someone who's interested in actually doing what I'm doing, which is lifting things off records.
Were you replicating the music via your trumpet, or were you playing it on the piano?
I didn't have a piano, so it was just either my trumpet or I was just writing it down. I would listen to it and then do it over again and write more and do it again and write more till I got it all.
Oh, that's super cool. I want to transition to how you're composed. Like, so when you have a new piece that well, actually, you know what? Before I even get there, how does melody come to your mind? Like, what is your composition process when you have to write a piece?
It's very messy. I have no system.
Okay.
I'm not one of those people who needs to create a form and then find the music to fit that form. I don't do a lot of pre-planning. Okay. I just sit down and start composing. It's like I get in the car when I'm going to drive to Denver from here and I don't have a map and I'm going to get lost. But as I get lost, I discover things by accident. Like, wow, I'm lost, but look at that beautiful lake I've just found. That I got off the highway and I'm lost, but I find this beautiful thing. Whereas if I have the map and I have it all planned out, I might get there quicker. It might be less painful and I'd get to Denver quicker, but I wouldn't have discovered that surprise, that lake. It's very much that way for composing. It's messy for me. It takes longer. It's frustrating, but I discover surprises that I don't think I would discover if I had pre-planned all of this stuff. But melody specifically, a lot of times melody for me, it comes out of harmony for me. And the two sort of give birth to each other slowly. So a little melody and then a little harmony to go with it. And so it becomes, it's this way, but then it also goes that way for me. And I have to do both. But for me, harmony is the real mystery for me. And the greater challenge is because it's three-dimensional. And, I met Leonard Bernstein once before he died when I was a student at Michigan and had the chance to just ask him about we're talking about harmony. And he said, if you figure out harmony, let me know because I still haven't figured it out. He said. It's the most difficult thing. And he has a great analogy for it. He says it's like a party in a big room with a bunch of people in that room. That's harmony. You can't predict how those people are going to move around that room and how the people in that party are going to relate to one another. You can't predict how that's going to happen. And it's very much how harmony is, unless you're doing super conventional harmony, tonic, dominant, and so forth. Sure. But if you're not doing that, and even then, if you look at the great composers from the past, look what they did with 1 and 5 and, with basic diatonic harmonies. They elaborated so that it's such a mystery. It's something that we can spend our entire lives working on, and we will never completely understand harmony. We'll go to our graves because it would take 100 lifetimes to completely understand harmony. And that's partly what draws us to it. And what I mean by that is the fact that we know we can't know it all. It's the mystery that draws us to it. If we had all the answers, it would actually be a little less mysterious and would be a little more boring. It's that mystery.
True. That is true. And then we're limited to 12 notes. So like, it's just magical what we can create from it, all the combinations. That's very interesting.
Think of those 12 people in the room, though. It's just 12 people in the room. But think about how they can relate on at any given time and moving around. Now they may go over here. It becomes thousands and thousands of possibilities in that room, right? These two people over there. Well, now they're over there, but now there's 3. But now there's a whole different. it's that way with harmony. It never, it's in quicksand all the time. It's always moving.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Are you when you're composing, are you is it just paper and pencil, or are you in front of a piano, or are you playing it out on the trumpet?
Yes.
Of all. Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, it's messy.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. It's also lying on the couch. It's also getting up and taking a walk.
Yeah.
It's also coming into the house and crying to my wife, "I'm not a composer. I'm a phony. I'm terrible." And my wife just saying, "Oh, I understand, honey. I understand." She gets it. And I come in, then a week later, I come in and I'm like, "Boy, isn't it great to be a composer? I'm the luckiest person. I'm so lucky I get to." And my wife is just, "Yep, honey, I understand." And she just stays. She stays even. I'm like this.
Yeah.
And she's just right there and keeps it more even keeled. So.
Is she a musician?
Yes, she is. We met in grad school at University of Michigan.
Okay. At least she understands. like my wife's a tennis player and a fashion designer, so it's either a win or a lose, and so she doesn't understand the gray area of what us artists are, like, especially conductors. She's like, so why is that person's career better than this career? You're just waving a stick. Like, I don't care. Like, if I could tell you the answer, I'd tell you. And then it's like, is it better hair, or what's the trick here?
It's what's going. I'm sure you've told her it's not just waving. It's what's going on between those beats, right?
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
What's going on here with this hand that's not beating, and what's going on here, and what's going on here. It's the same with tennis, and I'm sure. I remember that your wife is a tennis player, a professional, and I'm sure you've talked to her about the inner game of tennis and
of course. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like the Bible.
It's something she can relate to.
Yeah. Exactly. At least one thing, right? So harmony, melody, rhythm. I think if we were to just structure it down to like three things compositionally, you've mentioned about harmony, you've mentioned about melody. Where does rhythm come into play?
Well, again, for me, it's my background, but it's but I don't want to suggest that I am somehow unique because of my New Orleans background. I think there's something about just being an American. Because that music belongs to all of us. That sort of rhythmic based jazz music that's in our jazz. That very much is a part of who we all are. And now it's all over the world. It belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
So we all have it. But there's this. What we get from that, there's this, even when the music's not that fast, there's sometimes in our legacy, there's sometimes that kind of, and I'm almost like bebop right now, right?
Yeah.
But it could also be, it could be slower moving, and there's still that feeling. So there's an energy that comes from there. So that's part of it. Of course, we've all learned from great composers like Stravinsky, who completely revolutionized rhythm and meter. And that's certainly part of my DNA. But again, I'm not unique. That's part of every composer's DNA who's alive right now. We all owe something to Stravinsky, whether we admit it or not. There's just no way we can't deny Stravinsky as being it's just too great an influence.
Yeah, it's part of history, right? We learn from the past, and then Stravinsky certainly made a big splash to music history.
That's right. He was huge.
He was huge. Yeah. We have one question about the movement about the Creative Repertoire Initiative, but we'll get to that in a moment. Before we get to that question, I want to ask a little bit about David Johnson is asking a question. Hi, David. Best way to approach a collaboration with a conductor on one of your works?
Well, that's a great question. Is this a David Johnson in Georgia, or is it?
Yeah, it's a David Johnson, the composer from USC.
Oh, cool. Okay. Hi, David. That's a great question. And first of all, it depends on who the conductor is, and what that conductor. You have to get to know what's this conductor. Where's this conductor coming from? How does he like to work or she like to work? And then one hopes that conductor also has a sense of who you are. You have to first find out you have to first respect where each of you is coming from separately before you come together. I think that's a really important thing. And if one party doesn't do it, the other party certainly should do it. Somebody's got to make that effort. I think that just helps a lot. It just helps it helps the rehearsal to be more efficient because you already understand some ground rules. And, should I speak directly to you? Should I speak directly to the orchestra? Some conductors are fine speaking directly to the orchestra. Other conductors would rather go through, not for ego reasons, but because they don't want to be inconsistent. Everybody, and you have to respect that. Then there's, of course, there are conductors I work with all the time, like Carl St. Clair, where it is just such a joy because I almost don't have to say anything, or I'm about to say something. It's my turn to speak. I'm about to say something. And then Carl says the same thing I'm about to say because we're almost like this symbiotic relationship because we worked together for so long. Yeah. And so there's a real joy in that as well. But most importantly, here's something I think is really important for every composer to remember. Always stay open to the possibility that a gifted conductor will find aspects about your music that you didn't even know existed, and will find even more powerful and correct points of view regarding your music. And maybe not more powerful. Maybe there's not better or worse. Maybe I should even do value judgment. It's just another correct point of view. You have to stay open to that. And maybe the conductor's going at a tempo slightly slower than you're comfortable with or slightly faster. Don't just jump in and say, could you go a little faster yet? See where he's going with that tempo. See why she's slowing down here or speeding up there. See what the goal of it is first before you just jump in and say, that's too slow or that's too fast. You have to respect what they might be doing or what they see. Now, on the other hand, I think it's important for the conductor to do the same thing, to honor where the composer is coming from. And if the composer says, could you possibly do a greater retard here than you're doing right here? Because there's this modulation, and I would love it if we teased the audience and didn't give them the end of that retard where it modulates. We kind of withhold it a little longer so that when modulation finally comes, it's even more satisfying. Could you just try that? And so it's about mutual listening to each other. That I think has to happen.
David was my this is the David your previous student was my theory teacher, composition teacher at Mercer University, and also concertmaster for the Macon Symphony when I was there. And since then we've developed a wonderful relationship. I've conducted several of his pieces at University of Arizona and also with Phoenix Youth Symphony where I used to work. So yeah, thanks David for the wonderful question.
And I got to conduct Blue Shades with the Macon Symphony.
No kidding.
Yep. That was several years ago. David, I don't remember if you were, I don't even think you were were you still in? Yes, you were still in the orchestra then. So yeah, I had
no idea. Question from comment from Dave Lake, who is a radio host at Savannah, where I'm the music director of Savannah Philharmonic, and he's saying that I am playing Frank's An American Elegy on my WRUU evening eclectic show on August 16th broadcast. So Dave is he's all about contemporary music, living composers, and on his radio show, I'm pretty sure all of his music is like after 1980s, 1990s, and it's wonderful. Yeah, so thanks, Dave, for featuring Frank's music.
Thank you, Dave. That's a special piece to me. Always will be, because of its connection to those kids at Columbine High School. So thank you, Dave.
Justin saying, have you thought of writing more orchestra works?
I'm still doing it. I'm still writing orchestral works. I just finished my third symphony a few years ago now, for chorus and orchestra. And I just finished a piece for the Pacific Symphony that didn't get premiered because of this darn COVID mess. It was supposed to have been premiered in May, and it's a concerto for audience and orchestra. And what I mean by that is the audience gets to participate a little bit here and there. And it hasn't been premiered yet, but it's coming. Whenever we get on the other side of this mess, Carl is going to premiere that piece. So I'm still writing for orchestra.
Yeah, and then on Frank's website, there's the works for orchestra, audio and visual score. And one of the things I really love about your website is the fact that people can look at the score and listen to it at the same time. So there's no fuss about trying to get a a small score or a perusal score, or all of that. It's all here, and I love that you have it all available. So
yeah, thank you. One hint though, you have to click the triangle, start the sound first,
right,
and then open the score.
Right. Yeah. I've learned my lesson. I press play and it's like, why isn't the music playing?
Right.
With my guests, I always talk about the current affair, and one of the first thing that I want to touch upon is COVID-19. And so performing music has become such a routine activity for us for so many years. Then all of a sudden, because of this world crisis, performing in public has become extremely difficult. How has your attitude towards music and performing for an audience changed? And then if you could lead your conversation into telling us about Creative Repertoire Initiative, that would be wonderful.
Sure. And that speaks to that question that was posed earlier.
Exactly.
Well, first of all, nothing will replace live music. I mean, we're not going to let's get that elephant right out of the room here. There's nothing that can replace that spontaneity. And we all miss that. No question about it. And I can't wait for that day. Can you imagine? I just hang on to that image in my mind's ear and my mind's eye when we are all together again, and maybe when I'm on the podium, or maybe I'm just in the audience, and I see that, and I hear that intake of that inhalation, and then the downbeat and that first sound. I'm probably just going to lose. I'm just going to lose it, and I'm sure I won't be alone. Right? There are going to be millions of us in tears when that happens, because we know now we have taken for granted so long this thing, and no longer will we take it for granted. That's a huge thing.
Well, and that's the thing, because we've never had to think about audience. Like, the audience was always there because we never thought that we can't let audience come in. Like, that defeats the whole purpose of performing, the verb.
Right.
Yeah,
it's true. And we worry about audiences and audience size, and we want to build an audience. Every orchestra has to do that, but we always, deep down, we know we're still going to keep making this music,
right?
Even if the audiences are small, because we can't stop. That's just who we are. But now we can't even do that, and that's the part I think that we took for granted.
Yes, most definitely.
So my response to this at first was just, I guess I've got a long vacation. But then I got a call from a colleague, dear friend of mine, Alan McMurray, who said, Frank, we're in trouble now. Ensembles can't meet in a room. I hadn't even thought about it, but as few as 8, 10, 7 players can only meet in a room at a time because of COVID. What are you going to do? And it was a long, friendly conversation, but the gist of his conversation was, Frank, we're in trouble. What are you going to do about it? And I'm just like, I don't know, Alan, I'm eating my ice cream here. You're ruining my day. But then as time went on and it began to sink in, and I realized, this is serious. I've got to do something. And it occurred to me, there are probably a lot of other composers who were in the same boat thinking, what are we going to do? So I got on the phone and started calling I realized my solution would be to write some kind of adaptable music that can be playable by ensembles of any size, from 4 players on up, and any makeup, any combination of instruments. How do you do that? I had to think up the way to do that. And there's this thing out there already called flex music that's been out a long time.
Right.
I wanted something even more radical than that, because flex, it does allow sort of ensembles with smaller instrumentation, instruments missing, and unpredictable instrumentation, but you still kind of have to have some bass instruments to play the bass line.
Right.
You have treble instruments to play the treble. Well, the way I've done it, you don't have to have the bass. You could have only 4 flutes, and you can still realize the piece. That was my solution. It's tricky. I don't want to bog down this conversation talking about how I did it. I did it. Anyway, I got on the phone and I called allies, composer friends, and I thought I would have to do some arm twisting. And I was surprised I didn't. They all were, without even knowing what they were getting themselves into. Many of my composer friends just jumped on board and said, because they wanted to help. And so we formed this thing, which eventually became known as the Creative Repertoire Initiative. They're and you see one conductor, Robert Ambrose. And he's an important part of this whole thing because he's the coordinator of it all. And then the 11 composers here, you see, these are all highly respected composers in the wind band medium. And so we are collective, and we are basically, in a nutshell, we are committed to creating this music, this adaptable music, but also to encouraging others. We don't want to just be us, because we don't want to dominate the field and take away from others' ability to make their living. And so we're encouraging others to do it as well. And we're also advocating for them. So we have a Facebook group page. I think if you go to the bottom, it's like click on the group or something, and you can go to the Facebook group as well. And yeah, there it is, the Facebook group. And now there on the group, people can go there and they can literally download samples of their music. And they can say, I'm writing this. We even had publishers say, here's our whole catalog of adaptable pieces. So we are trying to just broaden it out as best we can, because we have to do this. Now, I have to admit, it's not as fun as writing, the regular music, but I feel it's something we have to do. And it flies in the face of a lot of things. It's challenging because you don't have all the colors that you can do when you're writing for regular ensemble. You've got to compress ranges. You've got to do all these things. But I think it's going to be it's going to contribute, I think, greatly to the need that's a sample of my Cajun folk songs. And it's basically, I can just quickly say, you see at the top there, those are C instruments and treble clef. In other words, flutes and oboes. And you've got the 4 parts there. Then you go down to the B flat instruments, that second group of 4. That's clarinets, trumpets, bass clarinet, tenor sax should be up there too. And it's the same 4 parts. Then it's down an octave by the time you get to the horns and the low brass down below there, but it's the same 4 parts. So this way, any combination, no matter who shows up on a Tuesday, maybe it's a clarinet, a saxophone, a trombone, and a viola. Maybe they're meeting. Okay, they can do it, because now I have string parts as well. I'm providing string parts as well for all of this. So that's sort of how it's going to work.
It's amazing. And it's Frank, we were talking about COVID-19 and the current crisis in the world. And we were mentioning offline before we started the show about how it's easy to get horrible news. Like, if you want to feel bad about yourself, just turn on the TV and you can be showered with just the awful news that's happening every day. But there has to be an outlet. There has to be a balance with life, and there needs to be some happy news. And I think this initiative with the composers giving us hope for ensembles, musicians, schools, and students, kids who are probably not going to be able to do district band or all-state band this year at all. Giving them some hope of playing music and written music that is written specifically for this, history that we are going through right now.
Yeah, that's very well said, Kay. And it feels good to know that we might be helping. And how much we're helping will only be determined as the year starts to unfold. But it just feels good to know that we're helping, and it is so satisfying and gratifying to know that composers now all over the world are jumping on board with this. And it's gratifying to me personally to know that it just began with this phone call with Alan McMurray, and look what happens, how human connections can happen. This connecting to this human, to this human. And before you know it, this whole network worldwide now that has happened so quickly because of need, necessity being the mother of invention. It's out of this need that this has happened. It's just really, it reminds me how human beings will rise to the occasion when the necessity dictates they do it, when they have to.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Jeff is asking, can you talk a bit about the role of technology in this COVID-19 environment?
Yes. Hi, Jeff, by the way. It's great to have you here. Yes, that's actually one of the categories. We have these many different categories of adaptable music. I mentioned the flex stuff. Then there's I guess we're calling it full flex. It sounds like some kind of exercise equipment or something, but it's full. There's also the cellular modular music, which is very much inspired by Terry Riley's In C. In fact, I wrote a piece called In C Dorian. There's improvisatory music. Omar Thomas has done one called Sharp 9. And then there's music with electronics, and Stephen Bryant is working on something in that area. Alex Shapiro, who is also a part of our initiative, is doing stuff with electronics as well. And other people who are not in the initiative have been talking about their music with electronics. And it makes sense because you've only got 4 or 5 kids in the room, but you can stick some electronics on your speakers in that room and have this thread going through that can be really magical.
Yes.
It could be a thread that serves a practical role, has a practical role to keep the players together, but it can also have this incredible aesthetic role in that it can provide a magic that just those 4 kids in the room can't provide. And so it's both practical and aesthetic. And so that's happening as well. So what's happened is it's just all exploded. This is what this pandemic has done. Before, there was just Flex music. And there was some good stuff, too. There's the Hal Leonard series. There's the Japanese Flex, by the way, Kay. You know, they have their Flex series because of their declining population. That's basically all there was. And now there's all these other things. It's far more. We've just burst it open. This whole box of what this music was now has gotten huge.
Well, and then 4 people is really good. It's just the right number of people to do it. Like there's plenty of duets out there, but 4 people, then your harmonies are even more.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. But I should say, some people are contributing duets to this whole adaptable need. Duets wonderful. For any combination of 2 instruments. Someone, I can't remember his name, but he's doing that. So it could be 2 flutes, or it could be a flute and clarinet, or it could be 2 tubas. The same music, and it's transposed so that so it falls within the horn range. And so, or it could be a horn and a clarinet. So that's the kind of adaptable thinking we're doing now. So even duets are being written within this framework that we call adaptable music.
It's wonderful.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It really is amazing. And it just gives us so much more resource that we never had, and something positive, you know, that came out of the current situation.
Right. And I think it will have a long-term, you know, this was pointed out to me. You know, this is not just for now. Someone pointed this, it was Pat Dunnigan, I think. Somebody pointed out, it's not just for now, Frank. Do you realize how useful this music is going to be in my conducting classes? College conducting classes need this when you've got in your conducting class 8 people and it's weird instrumentation, but they want to be able to realize the music. Well, this is useful for that. Yeah, and for all these rural bands that don't have complete programs, they will use this many, many years after this pandemic has come and gone. They still need this music. So it could have a long-term usage as well. And I say that to all. I mentioned that to conductors who are sort of thinking about, do I want to do this? It's only a temporary thing. Do I want to do all this work for something that's only going to be a 1-year crisis? I remind them that it could have use far beyond this crisis.
Yeah,
that helps motivate them. Yeah.
Most definitely. Well, it's amazing that what you're doing, and thank you so much for sharing more about the insights behind it. The other current affair that I always ask about with our guests is about Black Lives Matter. Yes. And so tell us how the Black Lives Matter means to you and how it influences your musical activities.
Well, it's been huge lately, not only for me personally, but at the university. We're at University of Southern California. The students have, and this is happening all over our country, right? They have come together and organized intelligently and respectfully and thoughtfully, but firmly, saying, we want a more anti-racist curriculum. What are you going to do about it? And here are some things we propose. And so they've got us all thinking about it. And I've been thinking of ways to completely I'm actually changing up my curriculum. So it's affecting me as a professor, but it's also affecting me as a human being. And I have to say, and I've been reading only Black authors this whole summer. I don't know. There's a great writer named Sarah Broom. She's a New Orleans native. It's called The Yellow House. It's about her house sitting right there in East New Orleans, which was the worst savaged by Hurricane Katrina. I'm reading Colson Whitehead, Underground Railroad. I'm reading nonfiction. There is a great biography on my mind just went blank here. Douglas, on Nathaniel Douglas. I can't remember the author either, but and I'm reading that right now. And then there's this a great work of fiction by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I've been reading a lot of his stuff. The Water Dancer I just finished. So I'm doing that, but not doing it just to make myself feel good about myself. I am really enjoying this. It's a whole body of literature that I didn't know about before. And I'm just the richer for it, for having now read this and continuing to read these wonderful books by these great Black authors. I'm just a richer person for it. I'm just thoroughly enjoying it. So that's yet another good thing coming out of, we talk about the good things coming out of COVID. There are good things coming out of Black Lives Matter, a lot of good things. Mm-hmm. The way we think about music and the way we think about how it has been so exclusive because of its history. There's this history, and it's our classical music especially tied to that history. Mm-hmm. What can we do to change that? And we're working on that now. And I think it's a really exciting time. I'm just happy to be a part of that conversation.
Most definitely. I'm so glad that we got to touch upon so many different topics, especially, from introducing your music to what you're doing now, how you're adapting. And, you're one of those people who there's two ways of dealing with the current issue is to one, do absolutely nothing, or to other one is to do something about it. I'm one of those people who just can't stay still. And so if I'm not doing something, I go crazy. So that's why I started music today. And now it's 72 shows since May. I've been doing 2 a day, English and then Japanese. But it's just a way to get, our fans of classical music, they have nowhere to go right now. And so once a day, if they can come and listen to some artists talk about what's going in their mind, just gives, it just keeps the heart warm a little bit, that musicians, we're all suffering, of course, but but we're also very hopeful that things will come about. And I'm talking to you from Japan, where last night I've been conducting, well, first of all, in March I came to Japan to do a concert, and then the flights got cut, so I couldn't go back home to Florida. And then right now I don't really want to go to Florida, so that's okay. But I'm in Japan, and I've been doing concerts that were for no audience, like just live stream with orchestras.
Oh yeah.
Yesterday was the first time I had audience in my concert, because now we can do 50% capacity in Japan. And
you don't want to brag about that too much. We're all jealous of that.
Yeah, well, and then it's just so one of those things that, once again, the audience factor is crucial. And I just want to make sure that people know that wearing masks is helpful, because I'm coming from a country where wearing mask has been a thing since the 1940s, and it's helpful. We a lot of us musicians in Japan have been going through all these experiments and studies where the mask is what is going to allow concerts to get back on stage and audience to come back on stage. So I just hope that when I see the media in the US and the news, and when I see people who are not wearing masks, I just don't get it. And as much as I keep saying it, but I really hope that it catches on. I really do.
I have to say, I'm an American. I don't get it either. Just wear the mask. I don't get it. I know where it comes from, but I don't get it personally. So until we do that, it's all going to be it's going to be all on us, the citizens of the country. It's not on the leaders. It's the citizens. We can control this or not control this. It's all our responsibility. So I hope we all, as a country, figure that out as a whole. I have to correct something. I'm so embarrassed. It's Frederick Douglass, everyone, not Nathaniel Douglas. So Frederick Douglass. Yeah, the great abolitionist from the 19th century. I'm just confusing so many authors and names. I got confused, but it's Frederick Douglass. Yeah.
I'm glad in the course of the conversation it came back up.
Oh, I had to. I've been so embarrassed not to correct that. I'm already embarrassed that I messed it up.
No worries. Well, Frank, thank you so much for joining me on the show and sharing your story. And then I have these super stickers on which people can donate. So thank you, Atsuko-san, for donating money for this show and supporting. And those of you who are watching, there's great conversation, especially for musicians who need music to play. Frank has the answer. So please do share this conversation, and let's get more music played from the initiative that Frank is doing. So thank you, Frank, for joining me.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you for what you are doing. You are giving up so much of your time to do these daily programs, and just thank you so much. We all thank you for that.
Thank you.
And all bless everyone.
Exactly. And then those of you who are watching, thank you so much. And then day after tomorrow, Jerry Junkins coming in to talk about what he's up to these days. So it'll be fun. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. ありがとうございました。チャンネル登録、いいね、そしてこのビデオをぜひシェアしてください。